Hello everyone and welcome to my oil painting class. And today we're painting the Trinnacle, the rocks at Dovestone Reservoir. A lovely viewpoint at the furthest end from the reservoirs. So we can see the whole valley below. A beautiful, beautiful way. And I'm really interested to see how we can explore the compositional path to our focal point, yeah? Um, I'm painting today on ochre background. I actually mixed a little bit of, I used acrylic paints to mix some white ochre and a little bit of violet to have that kind of darker ochre color. Um, it will support our beautiful valley colors and all the sunstone as well. It's also obviously it's off-white color, so it gives us a little bit of extra darkness from just if I would have just used a white and ochre, would have been quite light. So the violet gives us that extra medium darkness. I also have a little piece of board for exploring our compositional pathways, how we can make that focal point to stand out. Now, what I'd like us to do first is to decide on what shapes we're going to break our picture into. So, first of all, we have on the front, we have darker group of rocks. So those are our trinnacles. Sorry, I just ended up putting my tapes over my picture. I've got darker group of rocks. And these group of lighter rocks, so this one, two, and that's a third group of standing out rocks, a little bit overhanging. These are standing out on their own. Um, uh, these lighter group of rocks, they're both creating that almost like a front view. Okay, it's frames the rest of the valley. We're starting from the darks, we move into the lights. Then we have the darker part of the valley on the left-hand side and more of the medium to light tones of the valley at the back. Now, we could have all sorts of places where we can decide to have our focal point. It could be the group of rocks here, okay? It could be the path in that window which created by the rocks, or it could be somewhere else in here. Okay, what's depends on what we can do, what we want to make that important in our picture. I think my focal point is going to be somewhere between the rocks, the darker rocks, and the path. And there is not only just the interest point, but there are also other elements which can make that composition to focus on. Is contrasts in light and dark. So I've got dark shapes, I've got light shapes, I've got some dark shapes and light shapes of my path. Yeah, I've got some on the kind of on the border here, I've got some bolder darks and lights as well. I've got some good contrast of color. Okay. Yes, I've got some lovely greens at the front. Can I think them being part of that center, or can I introduce some of those extra colors to that valley at the back? Okay, to make it more interesting and getting that attention. That's the second thing, color. And the third element is contrast of detail. So something small, something large. So if I've got some big shapes, and I also got some smaller details in the valley of some of the texture of the heather, of the grasses, of some of the light grasses, and also the cracks and ledges on the rocks which will give us extra shadows and some interesting patterns. So it's contrast of light and dark, color, and details, what will make our focal point working. Okay, so if those three elements are going to be present somewhere here, it means my valley and the outer layers of perhaps this area will have to be much softer. So I'm going to use a bit of cloth for that, or you can use a sponge when we start painting our larger piece. So first, so we identified those three elements, but what I'm going to do on my sketch, I'm going to plan my overall main darknesses, my tones, and I'm going to work out my main colors. Now on my palette, I have some white, buff titanium, ochre, cadmium red or cadmium orange, whichever you might have. Any pinks in your reds, I'm using ruby today, violet, ultramarine, and Payne's grey. I think I'm missing emerald green, which I'm going to add now before I forget. Emerald green is coming up. Right, I've got my emerald green now. Right, and I'm now going to sketch my overall shapes for my smaller design. So I'm going to use a bit of diluted violet, just using a bit of tips, so it's not too oily. Okay, I've got my border of the picture somewhere here. Okay, and let's think of that window which is framed by our rocks. A group of rocks, dark group of rocks on the left. I'm going to almost box them up, something there. I've got a group of light rocks. Okay, something here. Okay, makes us think of positive, negative spaces, what's behind, what's other shapes, how far they're going to go into our picture. Maybe we can drop them down, maybe we can move them about. But it gives us that lovely, quick plan. Okay. I don't need to think about all the details, how they're breaking down. That might be enough. And I'm going to do a quick shape for my valley at the back. I think I'm going to bring this side of the drop a little bit further in comparison to the photo. I think that's might just here just almost cuts the edge of the top of the rock here. I think if I'll just bring it over, it will be quite good. The water from the reservoir will stay at the back. Okay, and it becomes almost as a central little feature. I can plan my path, which is in this open area of that window shape. I think just looking at the shapes on the right and the left, I can perhaps just move my rock a little bit further away. By the time my wide marks of the brush reduce to a thinner line. Hopefully that will be better, right? It's all reflecting a bit. And my path, which will be quite a good indication. Okay, that's the back of the valley there. The path will be a good indication of possible focal point. Yeah, the details, how the details going to go, how the slopes of the valley is going to go, kind of dictates that direction. Right, I think I might just change the angle of my board so we can actually see my lines better. Right, that's a bit better. So we've got big shapes. dark rocks, lighter rocks, darker part of the valley, slightly lighter part of the valley, and tiny bit of perhaps sky or even just a paler ridge for the valley in the distance. So I'm going to break it down in color now. Let's use a larger brush. I know it's quite small areas, but use a larger brush to have some big shapes of color. Now, easier probably to paint my big lighter rocks at the front. I've got my buff titanium, which we can mix from white, ochre, and a little bit of violet. And what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna test it. I think that will be pretty good. And that will be more or less pretty good as it is. Paint it as a big group. And there will be always variations. So if that's my buff titanium, okay, I can make it slightly darker, slightly more towards the violet, slightly more towards the ochre. And also, I'm just going to make it tiny bit towards the violet. And I can also make it going towards cooler color by adding a small amount of ultramarine. Okay. Because it's buff titanium, or if you mix it from ochre, it's not going to give us green. It's going to give us a little bit of that blue present. If we would have been using yellow, we might have been struggling with a lot of green color there. Okay, so that's my variation of this color. But I'm going to plan it as a big block. Paint as a big block. Okay. I can also use similar color for the tops of my darker group of rocks. Yeah, they almost have like hats here. Or if we see any other lighter ledges, shapes, that's look quite nice. Somewhere here. Again, this will be lovely to do, to work with when we painting on a bigger scale. Okay, that's good. Well, we're in lighter to medium colors. Let's find some colors maybe for the back. There will be some pinks, there will be some greens, there will be some ochres. So something similar as a starting point. I can use buff titanium as a starting point. If I'll add a hint of ruby to that, okay, that will give me a base for, okay, I'm going to put it in here as a variation for my valley at the back. I'm over exaggerating the color, but I think I'm on the right track. I think it might be a tiny bit more darker. So I'm going to mix it back with some ochre and violet, but there will be some pink in there. So I'm making my buff titanium darker, that's all. Okay, so that's just a orangey look, so a bit more of that pink. And tiny bit of white or buff titanium back there, so just slightly darker version of it. Okay, that's better. Somewhere there. That lovely hints of pink. So that central area, those concentrations of colors of where the pink will meet some lovely ochre, will meet some lovely greens, will meet some blues from the water, That's how we get that focal point to that area. I've just wiped my brush. I'm going to continue using buff titanium, bit of ochre, and a dab of emerald green. Okay, want to have something quite warm from the greens. You can see the colors are quite close to my darkness of the ochre background, which will work well for the distant valley. So we want the colors to be attractive to our eyes, but at the same time we want them to be soft on its darkness. We don't want to have huge contrast. They're further away from us. We want that softness and connection. Okay, there might be a little bit of extra green somewhere here. If I would have painted all of the area in a similar color, would have been fine as well for my design, but I'm already planning the colors. Okay, I'm simplifying. Yes, there will be some darker greens. Yes, there will be some more in between pinks and greens tones, but let's do something simplified, right? And I'm going to make a little more third color for the valleys at the back, buff titanium and more ochre. Okay, got that darkness. Okay, but we can also put some lovely highlights. Good. If you just mix your colors and just leave them on the side and start identifying where they might be, that will be plenty for this. Yeah, don't have to paint a picture. I'm more identifying the colors to make me think, to make me analyze potentials there. Okay, let's see if, oh, that's better. I can see the colors now. A bit better. Good. And then anything else for the darker part of the valley here, for the heather, any of these colors, I think it's again back to buff titanium, back to some ochre, probably cadmium red, some violet. But this time I need to have more concentrated paint, and all of that area will come together. Right, so that's one of my darker tones. Maybe a little more violet as well. You can do variations of those colors. For now, let's just stay with one. Yes, it comes closer to us, a little bit lighter here on the left. Let's just paint it more as a shape. Okay, we're touching close to the highlights of the valley slopes. Okay, so all of these shapes will come up. A little bit lost my paths on the bottom, but it's not a big deal. We can find it back. Okay, but those shapes will be coming in approximately together. Okay, and the water, sorry, probably the old riverbed. Now the path is somewhere here. Okay, I can use perhaps my little scratching tool to remove some paint, or even scratch it to the ochre background. I don't think we can quite see that yet. Okay, that's all good. So far we're starting with softer blends. The colors are getting quite exciting. And then we need to paint some darker rocks on the left-hand side. So I'm gonna go for similar area where I mix my color, just increasing a bit more violet and perhaps a dab of ultramarine. Just for now, to keep it as an alternative darkness. If it's too blue, maybe adding a dab of cadmium red will tone the blue down, neutralize it a little bit and bring it back towards some of the browns and grays. Okay, and somewhere here I'll block my rock here. Not too worried about if I'll lose my highlights, which I was excited about earlier on. For now, I'm interested in overall silhouette of this shape. Have to tweak any details. Okay, something there. Okay, so I just got big blocks of things. And the last couple of things are left are the sky and the reservoir itself. Just to have as a quick block of color, just wiping my brush off. A little bit of white, a dab of ultramarine. Okay. Now my brush is not overly clean, so my blue is not going to be overly clean, which suits me very well. Otherwise I would have been using a bit of gray there. I think that will just come in as a block as well. And for the sky, if you see a little bit of sky, it's okay if you were to choose just to paint the valleys. I think I might just squeeze a little bit of the sky somewhere there. Okay, something exciting is happening there. Lovely. And now we see a bit of a focal point in the center, because I have used a range of colors here. I have used a little bit of sharp contrasts and lights. I haven't got much contrast in here, which I can add as well now. So let's use any of my dark colors, what I've used for my rocks here, that violet, that ultramarine, that bit of cadmium red together, and create some extra, perhaps, shadows in this corner. Okay, not interested for particulars, more the fact that we have got contrasts, so I can just block few things around without finding exactly where they are. We've got some lovely grasses here, which I haven't done yet, but might come to that shortly, so that's quite good. Yeah, so that's again propelled our picture in. I think my tops of the rocks, these light ones, yeah, they just stand out too much. So perhaps my perception of them should soften down. Yeah, maybe especially the furthest highlights maybe should step away. Yeah, that's a bit better. much darker, but I think might be a better option. Okay, and these ones just a little bit less bright. Okay, so then this area becomes more exciting and more takes that balance back. Okay, good. And finally, I wanted to put some more contrast somewhere here in the center. Now to do that, or I have to paint something larger, or I have to just do a little splash or a little bit of something to create the interest, just as a plan, how busy and how, yeah, drawn in details we can make this. Okay, so I'm using my wooden wedge just to have a little scratch and a little bit of an application of sharper details so that attention has started to stay there. Okay, so it's a little more less pleasant on this picture, but we're not doing it for making it pleasant or pretty or anything else. We're exploring those elements of composition. So busyness is staying here. Might even put something fresh, light, maybe not white, maybe buff titanium, a flat path might bring that extra freshness there. Yes. So darker tones, lighter tones, nuances of details, that busyness and color. Okay, I think I'm gonna be happy with that. Okay. If I can do an easy splash with watercolors or acrylics, a little bit trickier with oils, but perhaps again on a larger scale, we can give that one a go. Okay, so that will be our basic plan. Sometimes it takes longer to do this plan, but it makes our painting much more stronger because we've taken time to think. It doesn't have to be everything perfect here as well. It's giving that opportunity to step back, analyze our picture, make these decisions initially. We can amend them as we go, but that initial plan is in place. Right, and let's get started on our actual painting. So I'm going to repeat the process with using my violet and the runny diluted paint to sketch my composition. And let's do this similarly as we've done before. A big shape for my rocks. How much space the darker rocks are going to take, maybe just a little bit lower actually. I can plan if this is my size of the picture, this is halfway through approximately, especially if my strokes will be a little bit narrower. Okay, approximately a quarter. So if this is my picture, approximately halfway through somewhere here, quarter somewhere here, so my rocks should be just above that quarter. Okay, gives me that little connection. Right, where are the rocks in comparison? The width of the painting again, this is approximately halfway through. This is approximately a quarter. That gives me almost like a central line for the second rock. Okay, so use any measuring tools possible to give ourselves a little proportion. Okay, so that's where that rock is going to be, somewhere here. Okay. So approximate height, approximate width. Okay, it's gently, not quite a straight line, just gently coming in. Okay, that box somewhere here. Okay. Right, and let's find the framing lighter rocks. Okay, we've got a big shape under our feet. Okay. And it's not as tall as the dark rock, maybe just a little bit below those shoulders, if we were to call them shoulders. Okay, I'm finding an overall shape first, and then we can find more definition for individual rocks. Okay, I'm using quite a lot of straight lines, so then I'm seeing that form more than little soft corners, soft shapes. I'm trying to see the whole structure there. Okay, and what's happening to this rock? Okay, maybe it just comes out a little stronger. So once I've found the overall big shape, then I can dig deep a little bit more into the other shapes there. Okay. Okay, that's all good. Right, and let's find the valley at the back as well. Just going to double check we've got enough space in between those rocks. Okay. I can divide this area of darker rocks into a box. Yeah, almost a box there. We haven't got quite right and wrong perspectives here. We haven't got much of a perspective. It's all layers of rock, so they're not perfect in their structures. They're just layers and layers and layers. I just draw little tops, almost hats-like shapes. Little platforms. Okay, this one stands up almost even as a perfume bottle or something, quite an odd artistic sculptural shape. Okay, but I'm gonna leave it out till I start painting and actually build it with color, build it with paint. I will find that slightly lighter platform, perhaps for that balance of light. If you'll stay with an overall big shapes, that will be plenty. Okay. Almost like blocks after blocks after blocks. Got like quite robotic figures. Okay, you can find all sorts of wonderful designs into here. Right, I better stop before I get too carried away with details in there. But again, they will be reasonably important for us because that's where that focal point is going to be. That contrast of simple shapes and detailed shapes will give us that focal point. So we'll play with that after. And now let's find overall shapes of my valley. Now remember I've extended where the slope of the valley is going to be so it doesn't cut through the rock. Okay. You don't want it to cut or touch it on the corner either. It's a little bit awkward when it catches it just on the border. Okay. And I need to find the water level. I think that's line could go slightly steeper. So I can find the reservoir. Where is it in comparison to the tallest rock? Yeah, almost goes horizontal and just gently drops down. And somewhere here at the bottom of it, it starts turning up towards us. Okay. Any of the valley lines goes away from here. Okay. To create a ridge. And another ridge, and perhaps leaving a little bit of sky somewhere there. Okay. And the water, that kind of little V for the water started to become the beginning of our path. So I'm sure there is still a water source going through that area. Okay, was somewhere on the side of it. I'm sure there is. But that gives us that lovely view of the valley. And a little idea of how flat part of the valley, kind of plateau next to the path, is developing. It might have a little darker area surrounding the original water source, and perhaps certain directional marks for the grasses, the heather. Okay, it's partially flat and then it drops down. Okay, that's good. And I think it might be enough details for me here. Right, now let's pick up a larger brush. I'm gonna have my cloth close by for smudging and moving the paint around. but I know it will be easier for me to mix the paint with a larger brush. I'm going to dip it into some oil. And let's start with some of the softer. Now I started with a lot of light at the front and then moved to the darker tones. But now I worked it out. I'd like to start from some soft areas at the back, progress through the middle ground here, and then come to some big shadows and some big lights at the front. Also will stop me smudging things at the front when I'm working through the background of the painting. So let's have a little bit of sky first. All right, I think I've used this brush for sky already. So I'm going to come back to it. Some white. So I just got a hair here. Some white. Yep, I've got some bristles coming out. Right, a bit of white, a bit of ultramarine. Okay, on the lighter side of things. And let's block that. Okay, that's quite dull. Let's put a little more fresh white. If you mix in the color, it's too dull, but it looks good for the water, for the reservoir. Let's paint the water. Okay, will give us that color while we have it. I think I've gone a little too far on the other side, but I quite like that shape. Maybe a little bit less to follow the nature of the valley, but it was quite nice exaggerating it a little. And I'm gonna wipe my brush just to get some fresh paint loaded, some fresher white, some fresh ultramarine. And that will be paler. Now, because we're using ochre background, our white against it will look always lighter. Sorry, like always warmer. Okay, so using the ultramarine will turn it more of a grayish color. So we have to really persevere to have a fresh color for it. I'm just making that part of the sky slightly different in volume of white and concentration of blue. Slightly thicker strokes to have a little variety. I think I will, it's a little bit similar gap for the sky. I think I will raise some of my hills there at the back, but for now that's good. Right, other colors we used. Remember we were mixing from buff titanium. So my larger brush is ready. I'm gonna have my buff titanium and let's start with something like emerald green and ochre. Okay, now that color is going to be more close to the center of the valley. So I know I wanted to paint at the back, but as I'm mixing colors, if I'm finding them, I can place them in. Let's just place it into that valley close to our path. Somewhere there. Maybe a hint of it somewhere this way. Okay, I'll bring some more of the stronger greens perhaps on my rocks. But for the distant space, I will need a dab of violet with my green. and a little more buff titanium. So it just softens that boldness of the green. It didn't quite work, so I need to go again. Green and violet together, kind of grayish green. Okay, that's better. Cooler green. That more into the emerald hint of the green. And as I'm going to apply it for the distant space, I'm going to integrate it with my sky strokes so I don't see too sharp borders. So I'm softening them. I can smudge it with my finger. I can smudge it with a brush. I can smudge it with a cloth. Okay, that will be quite good. I can increase a little bit of darkness of my green by using some violet and emerald green. You can see a little group of trees, the shape of that woodland here. Okay, so far it's so dark, but the shape is not quite defined, so keeping it vague. That's where my cloth can come in and smudge things into my ochre background. Okay. Seeing that lovely color from below. Okay, I want a tiny bit more definition for some of the part of the woods. Maybe I'll lose the rest. Yeah, I just want to see suggestions. Quite like the border of this valley. Yeah, it's a bit more of a steeper drop after it. So any contrast between colors or shapes need to be muted, need to be gentle. We want the contrast to remain further below. Okay, that's good. It's a good start. Anything else in that green? Maybe even a hint of my pink will work. Or magenta, if you're using magenta, they're kind of close to violet, will give us an exciting in between gray, between greens and pinks. And our valley will have a pink, so it's fantastic to have that connection to it as well. So I made my choices on colors or some of the ideas on my sketch, and now I don't need to worry about my shadows. I don't need to worry about the volume of details. I don't need to worry. I'll come to that. I can take my time painting, let's say, that middle ground. Yeah. As long as I keep referring on to my sketch, there's no anything particular too dark there till probably later layers with my details. So that's okay for me to persevere and explore my color mixing, my colors as individual strokes, my blending. Okay. Anything else greenish? Might come up somewhere here while I'm on the green. Quite like that ruby and emerald green together. Doing a really good combination for me. Combination of shadows, combination of that warmth and coolness at the same time. I'm painting that valley floor valley base. So if we'll end up with a lot of land colors, which not perfectly makes sense, but heading towards our desired plan. That's all good. Paint just a little more around that path. Gently loosen it, but I know I can paint a lighter snake line. And I'll get the path back in no time. Just seeing this lovely. I'm already starting to prep that range of darknesses, that sharper contrasts. Just using my ruby and my emerald green, just enjoying that combination and what's happening when the two colors mix. Okay. And that path. Okay, something interesting is happening here. Okay, but I will need to shortly stop. Oh, this is quite exciting. Again, same two color combinations, that ruby and emerald green. Oh, give me some wonderful ideas for the contrasts and the same time unity of colors. Okay, I'm loving that. Okay, but I need to be back to my distant valley. I need to bring my pinks back. Okay, but that's again could be a possibility of color finding shapes. Okay, they will be getting smudged soon. Good, I'm excited about that. Okay. Right, now I'm coming back to my valley at the back. And I'd like to have some of that pink I used before with buff titanium. So my buff titanium is here. I'm gonna go for my ruby, or if you're using magenta, or if you're using any other pinks. Sometimes it's good to have a hint of violet with it as well. I'm gonna start with that and see if it's light enough color. I think that might be quite nice. And I'm going to start adding a hint of violet to it and a hint of my emerald green, because emerald green, as we've just been discovering, been turning my pink into gentle purple or gentle pinky gray. So I'm going to have these areas enter lovely subtones of pink and green. Buff titanium also makes color less fresh in the sense of we're not painting pink flowers. It's a valley with rocks and vegetation. So, okay, maybe a little bit of that pink traveling over here. Okay. And perhaps as well, we can bring some of the greens over as well. So I'm going to wipe my brush. Right, so this is where if some of your shapes are sharp, or borders of those shapes are sharp. Mine are quite soft. You can use your cloth just to give it a little smudge. Right, I'm gonna get back to my greens. Maybe just even palette green, because I already mixed that emerald green with some violet or some pink. So any of that combination again. I'm just gonna bring a gentle touch of some of the slopes. Now they might start as slightly darker ones or a bit more intensive in contrast, but because my layers are quite soft, this will be very easy to smudge them even more. Okay, so starting with kind of placements of them, and then or using a cloth, or using a brush, or using a finger. Try all three, see which one's best. Okay, so just more of the idea that they're there, but we don't have too much sharpness. It's okay if you have a couple of stronger shapes, not a problem. We don't have to have everything super soft everywhere, but that majority of color will stay there. Good. I might put tiny bit more sharper border here and there on the top. It just will show that the groupings of plants or trees have started to appear there. It might be the next to the water. There is more vegetation in the flatter area there as well. Okay. And perhaps also while we're in that area, I want to put a tiny bit more fresher color from both titanium and pink. So I'm just going to bring a little, overdone my grayish pink. I'm going to put a tiny bit of freshness of that. Maybe even a hint of white, just to show some light in that valley. Okay, you see how you are. You might not need to do that. You might have preserved some of your fresher pinks. And I also want to have a little extra light. Might be just fresh buff titanium, maybe buff titanium and ochre. We'll come to that. And partially identifying the path, partially identifying the flatter surfaces of that walk, that part of the valley, just gives me some extra light. Okay, just gives me that extra light in the area. Takes that attention. It's still center of the painting, but it's less taking our focal point. Yeah, that focal point will stay a bit more below, but that's good. I can just tidy my water. I want to have the darker little mark on the bank of the water, just to be slightly narrow. I think it just stayed a bit too wide for me. Okay, that's better. So I've tidied my water a little more as well, so it's not perfectly straight and not perfectly even. Okay, that's quite nice. Good. Anything else here as well? Any identification of uh, patterns of lines on the hills while we're in that soft area, in the soft light, pale pink, pale buff titanium. That could be quite a nice line. A bit too strong throughout, but I know I can use my cloth to partially make it disappear. It might be a bit of light there. It might be something. That's quite good. Okay, just breaking a couple of simple surfaces. That's a lovely pinky gray. Okay, and I'm gonna stop as we've got quite a lot to go through at the front as well. But that's a lovely range of mid-tones for the background. Okay, good. Hopefully I don't need to come back too much there. Just double checking my darks for the water. Any of the darks need to come out a little wider. I think that's okay. Good. Right, now let's bring my darker shadows for the valley on the left, for the valley slopes on the left. And what we've done before, we used some of these colors. We had buff titanium as a big starting point, and then we went for cadmium red, pink red, violet, ultramarine. Okay, anything goes, any of those combinations. Oops. Okay. And I'm going to have a slightly lighter, maybe more color towards cadmium red and ultramarine mixture towards rocks here. Okay, so I can create a big block of that darkness. And I want to have a bit more darker and more towards the pink version, pink violet version for the color next to the border of my hill. Here, my valley's sharp contrast with a soft view at the distance. I can also paint my gaps between the rocks. Okay, which is actually a little bit paler. Okay, that's good. Okay, and back to that darker version. If you're picking up some background color and it smudges like mine just did, just persevere picking up fresh paint. Okay, that's in that way. And as I just been saying, my brush is doing some lovely smudges. A bit of buff titanium, that darkness. Will connect with the greens in the valley. Again, I'll just gently range it from more reddish color to more purpley one to a bit more the one using towards the blue. Okay. It's quite a lovely red. Okay, let's make it more of a lower, so sharper, more concentrated in that saturation in comparison to a little more distant color blocks. Remember, the focal point need to have that range. Okay, I'm going to bring some of that color elsewhere, so it's the further it's going away, the paler it becomes, but it's still within our range to be seen. Okay, that might be another rock there. Okay, my valley becoming a little too steep here. Just redirecting some of the lines so it's not just a dramatic drop. There are some dramatic drops, of course, but maybe not at every level. Okay. I'm just going to double check I've got everything painted over in that valley view. So I can finalize shapes after. Okay, I've got loads of darks, but I can bring some highlights there as well. I haven't done any of my lighter ochres of what I've done on my sketch, so let's just bring a little bit of that back. So both titanium and ochre. And let's create the texture we were after. Those nuances, that attention we wanted in that surface. Okay, and paints will be lifting the darks. So I'll keep, when it's lifting the darks, keep getting some fresher paint as well. Okay, that's good. Maybe this one will have a slightly mixed color. Okay. Stands out a little too strong so far. It doesn't integrate it. These strokes integrate it into the slopes. These ones haven't yet. So it doesn't mean that I can't smudge them partially. I will, but they will still have that clarity of detail. So let's just make these ones a little more blocky here as well. Okay, my cloth or sponge comes in here first as well. That's better. So smudged color and then a slightly thicker color over. Now those sub details will be much more effective. Oh yeah, did I want that stroke somewhere here? good. And as we haven't painted what's going to surround them, it's harder to see exactly how it's going to be. So let's persevere. I can have a little more connection to the other side of the hill, valley, my path, or river. If you turn it to a river, if you make it a pale blue, you'll end up with a river. I'll just place a little bit of a hint for it. Okay, it looks a bit too perfect in its twists. I can improve its variety by bringing, first of all, easier to paint a wider line and then shrink it in our painting. Yeah, by painting the stretching the colors on its borders. Okay, much easier to do that. I try to paint a very thin line. Okay, but I'm also going to add a little more variations to its bends. Okay, that's okay, a bit too wet paint. Okay, one bend, another bend. Same time I'm painting the flats around that path. Okay, slowly getting there. And then I can tweak it a little more with a smaller brush or with the same big brush. I can just encourage some larger straights. Okay, that's good. Any of my palette color could support the banks of that walk by painting a little darker borders. Okay. Good, so that sharpens up the edges, sharpens up what we want to our viewer to look at. That's where our little dabs will happen. Okay, I'm just bringing a little more extra darks here for some of the turns. Now I've established the silhouette of my path. I can start populating it with some texture of possible trees. I'm just using the same cadmium red or ruby and emerald green. Been combining those ones for a little bit. Violet could come in as well. Any of those color choices will be welcome. Right, that started to happen quite nicely. And let's bring a little bit more darker dabs, maybe somewhere from this corner of the hill to this corner of the hill, and then we can start working on our rocks. Just while we're in these colors, maybe a small lamp brush, maybe a flatter stroke from a bigger brush. Anything a little bit on the darker side of our greens and our reds. Okay. If you want to do a little bit of scratching there, I think I'll give it a go doing a small splash. Okay, that might be a bit too small splash, but I think I'm on the right track here to keep things a little bit more less perfect. Okay, those slopes might even have a little green connection. Just want to have a slight redirection of my slope lines. That's better. Okay. That's a lovely contrast as well. It's good. And I think I might put a little bit of something here. I haven't got trees on the picture, but I think if I were to put texture, I'm missing a little bit of extra browns in this area, but I think they will be quite busy with the shape of brown heather below. So I don't want to overdo it. So maybe a little interpretation of tree shapes. Okay, it's that connection of contrasts. I'm quite happy with that. Okay. Sometimes we have to paint, dabbing some trees, but I have to do double or triple mark on the same spot, so my thick paint will allow for the colors to remain there. So that's what's happening there. Okay, this is quite good as well. Right, I'm gonna stop at this for now, and let's work on our rocks. Right, so I'm going to start with lighter tones for my rocks. I've got already a lighter brush loaded with some of the buff titanium, so that's why I'm going to carry on there. And I have been mixing that color with a small amount of ochre, small amount of ultramarine. So let's get that one prepped. And let's block it first. Okay. If you use slightly more oil on your brush, the paint will become much more softer to manipulate. You can cover the areas quickly, and you can arrange the color gently as you go, from a hint of pale blue to a gentle change to the ochre, to change of to the violet. Okay, I'm getting a hint of violet here. Okay, back maybe to ultramarine. I left the gaps for the shadows. On a larger scale painting, I find it easy if I leave at least partially the bigger spaces for my shadows or my big highlights. It's easier to apply that fresh layer of paint after. Right here I can see a little hint of pink, so my buff titanium and a bit of pink will come together. So they're not too far away from each other's darkness, but the color is different. Okay, maybe a little lighter somewhere here. Don't be scared of using a cloth or sponge to blend the corners, or if you find it's easier to spread it, I think that would be good. Any other lighter tone? I don't want to overlight in there. I want that light to stay maybe more behind and more on the path at the back than overlight an area on the rocks, even if we see them light. Good. Good, good, good. And then the tops of the darker rocks. Now remember last time I painted them the same darkness as these groups, and they were a little too bright. So let's add slightly darker tone from ultramarine, from any palette color. So it will appear earlier on, perhaps in place, perhaps too dark. But then by the time we'll add shadows, hopefully that will be all in place. Okay, one. Another one. Okay, easy to see those shapes. Then draw it with a line. Okay, somewhere there, somewhere here. Little edge. Might tone that lower path. Little exposed rock, even tone it even more. To a medium darkness here. Okay, good. Okay. Right, and now let's paint the rocks. Now, looking at my little sketch, I'm noticing that my valley slope is much lighter than mine here. So the color of my rocks is actually competing, will compete with my exact colored valley. So I think if I were to brush my lower part of the slope with just the color I've just used, I think it just gives it a little paler corner. That's quite nice. Yeah. So a little bit of that gray will come to that. And then it gives me an opportunity to make the rocks darker. Right, and I'm back to my darker brush. But to make it less clashing, the rocks not clashing with the valley, I think I'll have more cooler colors. I'll go for more blues. Yes, of course I'll go still for my pinks, but maybe some extra cooler options will be welcome. Okay, I'm running out of my paint slowly, but let's just mix an initial starting point. That's quite nice. Not quite ultramarine, not quite the violet, but something in between. I have a little sharper borders with my highlights. Can always make my highlights smaller, easier to paint them slightly bigger, and then shrink them. Okay, start to add a little more blue, perhaps Payne's gray, just to make an indigo, but be careful not to make it turn the rocks into blacks. I'd prefer to work with color rather than black. We do see, we think we see black in loads of shadows of the rock formations, but we actually see more color there. Okay, just blocking my rocks here. Right, towards the bottom, I can have a little more indigo. So I'm using my black Payne's gray as my black Payne's gray and my pre-mixed blue variation. Okay. Finding some of these lovely borders. Just blocking. Just blocking. Oil paints allows us to have natural softness within the shapes. So I'm trying to have a bit of both while I'm blocking. The colors merge between each other, and they also need to have, so that they unite together, they stay together, they work together beautifully. But also slowly I'll need to differentiate them into subgroups. So this one might have a little extra warmth one side. A little extra warmth. Almost as if it's picking up some warmth from the heather below. Okay, overpainted that ledge, but a bit too late. And then my Payne's Grey and Ultramarine will come together for extra shadows. Can use some emerald green as well. I'll come to that in a moment longer. Okay, just want to see any exciting silhouette details. Again, my darker color, my black and ultramarine, don't stay perfectly dark because there's quite a lot of paint here, and it keeps mixing with lighter tones. So I think I'm finally passed through that. Okay, let's do this. Okay. And a little bit more sharpness into my shadows on the rocks, on the lighter rocks, and then I can define shadows on the left-hand side rocks. So here, if I'll start dark and then I'm gonna smudge into my lighter shapes, and that will give me a lovely gray gaps. Okay, can quite happily cut into those oily surfaces with a stroke. Okay, maybe a little darker here. Just wiping my brush to have few more. Few more sharper connections, cracks. Yeah, if you wanted to break shapes down a bit more, if you wanted to create your own a little bit of character for the rocks. The less perfect that they not slicing, they kind of have those textures. Becoming quite effective. Don't think I'm going to put that lovely green in here. I think I'm going to tactically leave it out because my greens and that range of color keep in my picture more, that focal point staying there. But I will continue with a little bit more texture here. So instead of the grass, I'm going to add a little texture. If you decide to put a bit of the grass, go ahead, try it on. If you're not too happy with it, you can always wipe it off. But you might be quite excited to see a little extra green. I think I will give it a miss on this occasion. And I've turned almost these shapes, those little textures, those little stone blocks, sub texture to have a more of a leading, more of an intriguing entrance here. Okay, don't want to overdo it. Okay, that's okay. Maybe this part will go a little less bright. And perhaps a rock stepping down. Good. And I just spot some of these shapes here as well with some darker shapes, just a little darker. So then my extra blocks will come. I think I need a smaller, more refined brush. Okay, here we go. So then I can get into my darks a bit more, and I need some more ultramarine and a hint of violet. Few more strokes and we're almost there. Maybe a cadmium red still to add. So a smaller brush and also perhaps a wooden wedge where I can create some more texture, or even if you don't want that texture there, lift some of the paint for some of the shadows. Yeah, or sometimes it just clears up the oily surface away. Okay, I think that will be quite nice. I quite like the texture of it as well then. I don't know if I'll keep it though. Right. Back to my cadmium red, back to my ultramarine. With that buff titanium, that will give me a really wonderful dark. Okay. Sometimes black looking shape as well. Sorry, color as well. So let's find some of these exciting strokes. Okay, contrast. A contrast. Yes, the paint will be my brush will be lifting the lighter layers, so I'll have to keep topping it up. Okay, so that darkness next to the border of the hats-like shapes. Okay, next here. I can see a lovely red in it. I can see a beautiful violet color in it. So don't just make it black. Please look for shapes. Bring some fresh blue, or that blue will mix together with your existing colors. Okay. I'm seeing patterns of dark. That's what I'm aiming for. I'm gonna try to, if I start with almost like similar dabs in size, I'll aim to vary them eventually as I introduce a good volume of those darks. Where I scraped some of the paint, the area becomes warmer as well from the colors we see below those layers, and that gives a shine to the surface as well. Okay, I'm not sure about that bit. Let's just turn it more dull than sharp. And I do want that almost shoulder-like corner to stand out a little more bold and confident. Keep topping up fresh paint. And now somewhere here as well. That was a little plain boring silhouette, so that's a bit better. It's almost like a shoulder blade. Okay, so I'm painting an impression of these rocks. That sharpness of them is growing. That contrast is growing. Careful with too much softer blend. So I'm trying to do each individual strokes almost like a new color, almost like loaded it up freshly again and again. So they're not overly smudged. Okay, that's good. Anything else here? There's a little bit similar. And finalizing this corner as well. Different length strokes, different filling in, yeah, areas representing those structures, imitating the variety. Lovely. Right, something I might not even touch. Yeah, it doesn't have to be overly touched, over painted. Quite like some of the tiny little small dabs. I might put a couple of more somewhere here, and perhaps even on the borders here as well. Okay, I can see more rocks there, but I think I'll keep that one simple. Right, so this one, can I have a bit more structure to that shape? I don't want it to be too soft or wobbly. Okay, that's better. And I need a hint of white here. To see the slope going down. That rock standing down. Okay, that's good, that's good, that's good. Anything else? Maybe this corner less bright. Just a moment, toning it down. Good. Right, anything else on the valley behind as a mini playful light coming up? I think if I were to use my buff titanium and ochre, maybe a hint of that red as a direct color and smudge it a little into the color of the slope here, it will start blending, and then I can send it in. That's better. That's quite exciting light. And I think I'll bring it in. Okay, and it will connect it here as well. Will have a stronger saturation of warm color for me. Good. Good, good, good. That attention to the details around the area is increasing by increasing that shade, that color. Right, anything else here? Anything else here? Anything else? Soft, round, sharp, strong, contrast. Right, just smudge that one back. And I think I'm quite happy to stop. Might put a little bit of less color as well on the rock. It's not going to make a huge difference, but it will balance with some of the color I already have here, and it will bring that connection to that corner here as well. Yes, that's a lovely one as well. And that's worked as well. Right. And I'm going to finally stop. Exciting. Exciting changes. Got lovely focus where we wanted it in the center by getting lights and shadows, details, and the range of color. So thank you very much for painting with me today. Well done. And I look forward to seeing your paintings. Thank you very much.